Nobody from my family came to my wedding. Not my parents. Not even my best friend. They all chose my sister's engagement party instead. But as we cut the cake, my phone lit up, a message from my mom. "We need to talk. Now." Followed by 52 missed calls. The silence at my wedding wasn't the peaceful kind you see in movies. It was the hollow, stomach-dropping silence that comes when you realize something fundamental is missing, and that the absence is deliberate. I stood at the altar beside my wife, looking out at a sea of faces I barely recognized, while the front row, the seats reserved for the people who mattered most, sat completely empty. Four pristine white chairs with hand-calligraphed name cards that we'd spent an entire Sunday making, Mom, Dad, Amanda, Matt. Not one of them showed up. At first, I convinced myself they were running late. Traffic, maybe? A wrong turn. I gave myself a full 30 minutes of hopeful delusion before the truth finally sank in. They weren't coming. My parents, my sister, and my best friend since childhood had all chosen to be somewhere else on the most important day of my life. The ceremony continued around me like I was watching it happen to someone else. Guests smiled and clapped at all the right moments. My wife, bless her, caught my eye several times with that look that said she understood without needing words. She knew I was barely holding it together. So I performed. I smiled until my face ached, shook hands with distant relatives, made small talk about the weather, and even managed a toast that people said was touching. But as we cut the cake and everyone leaned in with their cameras, my phone started buzzing insistently in my jacket pocket. I tried to ignore it at first, but the buzzing wouldn't stop. Finally, I slipped the phone out discreetly and looked down at the screen. One text from Mom. "We need to talk now." Another. "Call me please. It's urgent." Then I saw the call log, 52 missed calls. Mom, Dad, Amanda, Matt, over and over again, like some kind of panic symphony. I called Mom back, and she answered before the first ring finished, like she'd been sitting there waiting for me to break first. She didn't ask how the wedding went. Didn't apologize for not being there. Didn't even acknowledge that they'd missed the most important day of my life. Instead, she launched into what sounded like a rehearsed explanation about Amanda's engagement party. "It was today too," she said, as if this was news to me. "We had to be there because his family was only available this weekend. You know how important first impressions are with in-laws." The casualness in her voice made my chest tight. She wasn't apologetic. She was explanatory, like she was telling me about a scheduling conflict at work. Then came the part that made the ground feel unsteady beneath my feet. "You remember that money transfer you sent us in July? We had to use some of it for Amanda's venue deposit. She didn't want anything cheap, and you understand, you'd want your sister to have a nice day." I stood there in my wedding suit, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my mother admit that they'd stolen money I'd sent for my own wedding expenses to fund my sister's engagement party. And she said it like it was perfectly reasonable. She kept talking about the live band they'd hired, the private chef, the imported wine, all funded with money I'd intended for my own celebration. Even Matt, who I'd asked to be my best man, had volunteered to MC Amanda's event instead. "He said he'd make it up to you later," Mom added, like this was just a minor scheduling hiccup. I don't remember how the call ended or what I said. But I remember the exact moment something inside me clicked off permanently. It wasn't rage or even heartbreak. It was just a complete, final disconnection. They'd taken the most sacred day of my life and treated it like an inconvenience to be worked around. Worse, they'd made me fund their betrayal. And they genuinely expected me to understand, to forgive, to roll with it like I always did. That was their fatal miscalculation. The next morning, I woke up with the strangest sensation, a mix of absolute calm and crystal clear purpose. I didn't discuss it with my wife yet. I just made coffee, sat at our kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I'd been my family's personal ATM for so long that I'd stopped thinking about it. Every time Dad fell behind on bills, I wired money without question. When Amanda's college tuition came up short, I covered the gap before she even asked. Mom had a credit card connected to my account, for emergencies, that she'd been using for 4 years. Amanda had one too. Even Matt had borrowed rent money from me once when his car broke down, money he'd never mentioned paying back. The damage was all there in black and white, spread across years of bank statements and digital receipts. But as I scrolled through the transactions, I found something that made my blood run cold. 2 payments to a luxury banquet hall in Bridgeport. A $7,000 charge to an upscale catering company. Designer dresses, elaborate floral arrangements, a deposit for a local jazz quartet. And then the one that made me stop breathing, an open bar invoice under my name for an event at the exact rooftop venue Amanda had always dreamed of renting. They had literally used my identity and credit to plan and execute my sister's fantasy engagement party, on my wedding night, with my money. But the hotel reservation was what pushed me over the edge. Matt's name on a 3-night luxury suite, all expenses billed to the emergency family account I'd set up years ago. That's when I understood with perfect, horrible clarity. I had never actually had a family. I'd had a system of financial dependence masquerading as love. They adored Jason the provider, Jason the problem solver, Jason the walking credit line. But Jason the groom, Jason the person with his own needs and dreams? He was disposable. So I started small. First, I logged into the shared account Mom used for groceries and household expenses. One click, account frozen. Then Amanda's credit card, which she'd been using freely for years. I accessed the admin panel and reported it lost/stolen. The system immediately locked it and ordered a replacement, sent to my address instead of hers. Next, I made a few phone calls. The catering company, the venue, the jazz quartet. I told them all the same thing: unauthorized charges, fraudulent use of my credit. I didn't even have to lie. I had never approved any of these expenses. They all panicked appropriately. Some sounded genuinely nervous when they realized what had happened. A couple mentioned that Amanda had been planning a second event for the following weekend, meant to impress her fiancé's extended family. That event was now dead in the water. I didn't answer any of the frantic calls that started pouring in. I just let the panic build and compound on itself. Amanda's voicemails evolved in real time from passive-aggressive confusion to desperate pleading. The first message was her pretending she had no idea what had happened to the accounts. By the fifth, she was swearing they'd pay me back somehow if I'd just unlock everything for a few more days. Mom tried the guilt approach, saying they never meant to hurt me, that it was all just poor timing, and Amanda not thinking things through. Still no actual apology, just the expectation that I'd make it easier for everyone, like I always did. But Matt's message was the one that really crystallized everything for me. He actually texted me a photo from Amanda's engagement party. Everyone raising champagne glasses, huge smiles all around. His caption: "Wish you were here, bro." The audacity was breathtaking. Instead of responding to any of them, I booked a remote cabin rental for my wife and me. Somewhere with no cell service, just a fireplace and peace. As we drove away from town, I finally explained everything that had happened. She listened quietly, then said something that hit me like a revelation. "They never deserved you." Those 4 words felt like permission I didn't know I'd been waiting for. The cabin was exactly what we needed: complete silence, no expectations, no one demanding anything from us. Just 2 people who had chosen each other, existing in the space we'd created together. Meanwhile, back in town, the chaos I'd set in motion was reaching a crescendo. When we returned from our mini honeymoon, I left my phone dead on the counter for hours. My wife didn't ask about it. She understood that the moment I plugged it in, the outside world would come crashing back. When I finally powered it up, it vibrated nonstop for 3 straight minutes. Dozens of notifications, missed calls, voicemails, text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. But I didn't need to listen to them all to understand what had happened. My cousin Becca, probably the only family member who still talked to everyone, sent me a single, telling message. She lost it. The party fell apart. Later, Becca filled in the details. Amanda's second engagement party, the one meant to dazzle her fiancé's wealthy family, had been a complete disaster. The florist never showed up. The band cancelled. The caterer backed out the day before. Apparently, Amanda had promised everyone full payment upon delivery, but when she realized all the accounts were frozen and the services were on hold, it was too late to salvage anything. The guests still arrived, expecting an elegant celebration. Instead, they walked into a half-decorated venue with plastic trays of grocery store appetizers that Amanda's friends had thrown together at the last minute. Her future mother-in-law actually asked where the promised cake was. Amanda locked herself in the bathroom for 20 minutes. There were no toasts, no music, no impressive second celebration. And for the first time in years, no one from our side of the family was there to swoop in and fix things. That's when I finally listened to Amanda's latest voicemail. Her voice was shaking, part panic, part fury, but somehow still entitled. "You're being cruel," she said. "You're punishing the whole family for a misunderstanding. This is an overreaction, and if you don't unlock those accounts, we'll be embarrassed in front of people who actually matter." People who actually matter. There it was, the truth finally spoken out loud. I wasn't someone who mattered anymore. The message ended with her demanding I call Mom because she's crying and Dad's furious. So I checked Dad's voicemail next. His tone was cold, controlled, but not paternal, more like a disappointed business partner. He said they couldn't get a loan to cover Amanda's expenses because of their credit situation. That they were behind on bills. That I had escalated things unnecessarily and was tearing the family apart. Then came the line that crystallized everything. "You're making a mistake cutting us off like this." Not, "We're sorry." Not, "We went too far." Just that I was making the mistake by refusing to be used anymore. They still thought they were entitled to me, like I was some kind of subscription service they could reactivate at will. That night, I sat down and built a spreadsheet. It took me 3 hours to compile everything, every dollar I'd ever sent, every loan, every gift, every emergency transfer, every rent payment I'd covered, every credit card bill I'd handled when Amanda claimed she was between jobs. Even that $1,200 Matt had borrowed for his car repair, money he'd never brought up again. When I finished, the total didn't shock me, but seeing it all in one place felt like holding evidence of a crime I'd been unknowingly funding. $137,000. I printed 3 copies and mailed them separately, one to my parents, one to Amanda, one to Matt. No note, no explanation, just a simple title at the top. "Here's what it costs to be your son, your brother, your friend." Then I called my cell provider and changed my number without telling anyone. I didn't announce my departure or send goodbye speeches. I just disappeared. 2 weeks later, Becca reached out through social media to tell me that Amanda had gone completely silent. Her fiancé was apparently concerned about the financial issues and her behavior. His parents were pulling back, asking uncomfortable questions, getting nervous about what they'd gotten themselves into. Mom was telling relatives I was taking time for myself. No one mentioned the wedding. No one brought up the engagement party. They just buried it all like it had never happened. Matt had vanished from my life entirely. They had pushed me out of the frame so they could center their own story, so I took myself out permanently. And the silence that followed was absolutely beautiful. It's fascinating how quickly people rewrite history when they realize they've lost control of the narrative. 3 weeks after I sent those financial statements and cut all contact, the family's silence shifted from avoidance to strategy. They started talking around me, crafting explanations for my absence that painted me as unstable rather than justified. I only knew this because Becca kept me informed. She'd had lunch with Amanda and Mom, expecting normal family gossip, but my name dominated the conversation. Amanda told her I'd been acting off for months and had lashed out because I couldn't handle sharing attention with her engagement. She claimed I froze the accounts out of jealousy, that it was never really about the money. Becca didn't believe a word of it and told me everything. But what really stunned me was learning that they'd approached Matt for help. Not to check on me or make amends, but to ask him to reach my wife. They thought maybe she could convince me to put this behind us and attend a family dinner where everything would be swept under the rug. Matt actually did it. He texted my wife while I was sitting right next to her on our couch. I watched her face as she read his message, saw her expression shift from confusion to disgust. She handed me the phone without a word. "Hey, I know things got messy, but maybe talk to Jason. I think his family is trying to make things right. Don't let pride ruin peace." Pride. The word hit like a slap coming from someone who'd abandoned my wedding to MC a party I'd unknowingly funded. My wife blocked his number immediately. That's when I realized this wasn't just my battle anymore, it was ours. She'd drawn her own line in the sand. A week later, I received an email from someone I didn't expect, a woman named Lacey who introduced herself as Amanda's former friend. She'd been at the original engagement party, and felt I deserved to know what had really happened there. What she told me changed everything. Amanda hadn't just used my accounts to fund her party, she'd been bragging about it for weeks beforehand. Lacey said Amanda had joked about me being her walking credit card, claimed I'd never say no even if I found out, and worst of all, had told people I'd offered to fund the entire celebration. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was public humiliation, turned into entertainment. I stared at that email for hours, something cold and final settling in my chest. My wife found me there and asked simply, "What do you want to do about it?" I didn't answer immediately. But that night, I started collecting evidence. Screenshots, bank statements, voicemails, photos from our wedding showing those empty front row seats with their untouched name cards. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing for truth. When a mutual acquaintance reached out asking if I was okay because he'd heard a weird story about me having a breakdown and skipping my own wedding out of jealousy, I knew it was time. I wrote a post. Not dramatic or bitter, just factual and clear. I explained that I'd gotten married the previous month, that none of my immediate family attended, that my sister had hosted her engagement party the same day using money I'd sent for wedding expenses, that my best friend had ditched my ceremony to toast someone else at an event I'd unknowingly funded. I didn't name names. I didn't insult anyone. I just told the truth and attached one photo, my wife and me by our wedding cake, with those 4 empty chairs clearly visible behind us, their name cards still in place. I hit post and walked away. What happened next moved faster than wildfire. The post went viral in our extended network. People shared it with captions like, "Imagine doing this to your own brother," and "This is why I have trust issues." Others just posted broken heart emojis or said they hoped I was healing. The messages started pouring in. Old coworkers, college friends, distant relatives, people who hadn't spoken to me in years. They all wanted to say they'd seen it, they believed it, they were sorry. Some shared their own stories of family betrayal, of being the one who always gave until there was nothing left. But the most important response came from an unexpected source. Amanda's future in-laws had seen the post too. Someone had sent it to them, and they'd realized they'd been fed a completely different story. Amanda had told them I'd insisted on the same wedding date so we could celebrate together later. When they read my post and saw that photo of empty chairs, everything clicked into place. 3 days later, Becca called with an update that felt like cosmic justice. Amanda's engagement was officially on pause. Her fiancé said they needed time to reevaluate priorities. His parents had pulled their financial support for the wedding, uncomfortable with the lies and manipulation they'd discovered. My parents, for the first time in my adult life, went completely silent. No angry calls, no guilt trips, no desperate voicemails. They just disappeared, probably too stunned to figure out how I'd flipped the entire script without ever naming them directly. Matt tried once, a long email about how I'd aired private family matters and embarrassed good people. I deleted it without responding. But the message that meant the most came from Lacey, the woman who'd warned me in the first place. "People finally saw what you lived through. That matters more than any apology you'll never get." She was absolutely right. This wasn't about revenge anymore, or even justice. It was about truth. And for the first time, everyone could see it clearly. The silence that followed was different from before, not the silence of avoidance or neglect, but the stunned quiet that comes when people realize they no longer hold power over you. Eventually, the first crack appeared. Mom sent a carefully worded email that managed to avoid any actual accountability. She said my post had damaged the family's reputation, and that I'd put private business out there, causing confusion among people who care about us. No mention of what had actually happened. No ownership of their choices. Just concern about their image. I didn't reply. Amanda tried to reach me through Becca, wanting to talk privately and start fresh. She even floated the idea of rescheduling her wedding with an invitation for both my wife and me this time. When I asked Becca if Amanda had ever actually admitted what she'd done, Becca just shook her head sadly. Nothing had changed. They weren't sorry, they were just cornered. Dad mailed me an actual letter, like a guilt grenade from the 1980s. He claimed he didn't know all the details, but insisted that families have to forgive each other, and that I was too emotional to see the big picture. The big picture. That's what they'd always said when they wanted me to ignore my own pain and make things easier for everyone else. Matt's email was the most pathetic of all. He said he didn't handle things as well as he should have, but felt attacked by the public fallout. He claimed he'd had loyalties on both sides, and that it was unfair to air dirty laundry online. It was the most words he'd said to me in a year, and I didn't waste a second responding. I wasn't angry anymore, that fire had burned out completely. What I felt now was clarity. For decades, I'd been orbiting around people who only noticed me when I was doing something for them. When I stopped moving, they lost their gravitational center. And instead of asking why I'd stepped away, they tried to drag me back into orbit. But I was done revolving around other people's needs. I had my own life to live. A few months later, my wife and I hosted a small dinner party at our house. Just friends, people who had actually shown up for us over the years. No pressure, no forced conversation, no family drama lurking beneath the surface. We cooked together, lit candles, played music, and spent the evening laughing about absolutely nothing important. At one point, I stepped back and just observed the scene. Every person in that room had chosen to be there. They weren't bound to me by obligation or guilt or financial dependence. They simply enjoyed my company, not what I could provide, just who I was. There were no empty chairs at that table. The realization hit me harder than anything else in this entire saga. For years, I'd been desperately trying to fill seats for people who never bothered to actually sit down. Now, without even trying, my table was full of people who wanted to be there. That's when I understood I hadn't lost a family. I'd escaped one that was slowly killing who I really was. The last message I ever received from any of them came from Amanda, a plain text with no punctuation, just 5 words. "We're still your family, Jason." No apology, no insight, no acknowledgement of what had happened. Just a quiet plea to return to the version of myself that had never really existed, the one who disappeared into their needs so completely that my own became invisible. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because there was genuinely nothing left to say. They were right about one thing: we had been family once. But that version of us could only exist as long as I was willing to erase myself to maintain it. Now I was here, fully present and visible, and they were nowhere to be found. That told me everything I needed to know about what we'd really meant to each other.